request for a wetland development permit for impacts to an on-site wetland. I brought up the site plan for you. You see the health facility is located in the southeast corner of the parcel, and you see the wetlands identified on 2/3 of the property. This type of facility is designated as a type 2 essential public facility by the Lacey Municipal Code, which means that prior to application submittal, the applicant must complete a 90-day early notification process. The purpose of this is to ensure that the essential public facilities have that adjacent jurisdictions and affected public have an opportunity to review ahead of time and provide comments on the application. The applicant provided their early notification and a notice was posted in the Olympian. The applicant also held a public meeting prior to submittal of their land use application as part of their early notification process. Once the application was submitted, staff's review of this application focused on compatibility with the zoning district and surrounding community, security concerns, community need, and economic impacts, in addition to wetland impacts. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, a wetland development permit was included as part of this application packet. A wetland report was submitted identifying 4 wetlands that are on site. 3 are category 3 wetlands, and 1 is a category 1 wetland, considered a wetland of high conservation value because of some swamp forest actually that's located on the site. The applicant is proposing to fill 1 wetland, and that one that they're proposing to fill is on the western portion of the site. It's the only wetland in the area where there is some upland and buildable area on the property. In accordance with the City of Lacey Wetland Protection Ordinance, specifically Section 1428 465B, and with guidance from the Department of Ecology, the applicant is proposing to mitigate the impacts of the filling of the Category 3 wetland and some indirect buffer impacts to Wetland A here. They're proposing to mitigate through permanent preservation of the Category 1 wetland of high conservation value, as well as the remaining wetlands on the site. And this is per the Wetland Protection Ordinance. As part of their buffer mitigation, they propose to mitigate impacts through invasive species removal, as well as through hydrologic monitoring and some other wetland plantings on site. A public hearing was held via Zoom on May 18th. Notice of the hearing with information related to how to participate was sent to all the parties of record, as well as adjacent property owners, and posted on the site. At the hearing, staff, the applicant, and the applicant's consultant team provided testimony regarding the project. Topics of discussion included wetland impacts, traffic mitigation, facility procedures and security, and neighborhood compatibility. Several members of the community did attend the hearing virtually. However, none provided comment on the record at the hearing. Many did submit letters of support for the project during the application review, noting the need in the community for this type of mental health and behavioral health facility. We didn't receive any comments in opposition to the project. So based on the staff report and exhibits and testimony at the hearings examiner has recommended approval of the project with conditions substantially as recommended by staff. And this afternoon, we're requesting council approval of the project as recommended by the hearings examiner in his report dated June 10th before you tonight. That I'll turn it back over to you.
Can I get a motion?
I would. Go ahead, Cynthia. I'm sorry.
You're on mute, but.
I move that we approve the conditional use permit, case number 1992.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We have some discussion. Deputy Mayor, and then I'll go Carol.
So I have just a couple of comments and then one question. I'm really pleased that they came back and redid their wetland protection for, and I think it was wetland B, the category 1 for, because protecting also plants that are endangered as well. But so that is great. But I have one question, and I know we've done this before, but I've never known how it helps. So tell me how assigning transportation impact fees will make up for the LOS category F. I mean, how will the money make up for the fact that it's still going to be level of service of F?
So the traffic impact fees, I don't believe are proposed to mitigate impacts to Marvin Road. So Marvin Road is a strategy corridor in the city's transportation plan, which means that it has Scott, if Scott Egger is on, he can probably explain this a little bit better than I can, but it means that the roadway is at capacity and there aren't means to fix impacts to the roadway. However, it is still expected to be developed or to have development on it. There are strategies in place for alternative methods of transportation, like bus transportation and facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists to help mitigate impacts to the roadway. But Marvin Road is considered a strategy corridor, which means it can remain level F even with additional development.
Okay, I'm not anti necessarily this project. I just needed to find out that question.
Sure.
Yeah,
the hearings examiner actually asked that question as well.
So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Well, Scott, can we add one thing there?
I'm not sure if
when we talk about a strategy corridor, there's a recognition that we're not going to build any more lanes is one way to look at it. So Marvin Road is already a 4-lane profile. So at some point, at least a local street is going to reach a certain capacity or size, because it just would be inappropriate to build, in a sense, I-5, between, the interchange all the way up to, say, Jubilee. So there's a recognition there that you're at capacity. Does that help, Scott?
So what happens to the funds for the impact? They just go into our transportation pot?
So, I apologize. First of all, I was taking advantage of virtual meetings and doing some other work when the question was answered. But in terms of transportation mitigation fees, there are numerous projects that are identified, on the tip throughout the city. And when they do their traffic impact analysis, they have to do trip generation, which determines the number of trips that will be generated for the project, and then they do a distribution. And then based on which projects that those trips run through, they pay a fee, and that's what generates the fee. So technically, those fees go to those projects. But if you are in one of these strategy corridors that will not be expanded, that doesn't mean they don't have trips going beyond there, impacting other areas. So they will still pay fees, but B, they also need to find another way to help mitigate the traffic through that mitigation area or strategy corridor that, as Scott just described. And that may be, and maybe this was already said by Sarah, I apologize if I'm repeating, but maybe improving bus service. That may be coming up with different pedestrian connections between the different zones. There's a host of things people can consider to help mitigate traffic, as well as potentially teleworking and reducing trips. But that's you look for those other options within a strategy corridor to help mitigate the volume.
So the LOS.
Do we have sidewalks on that side of Marvin Road all the way up to this project?
So I believe the sidewalks are potentially our Marvin Road improvement project. I don't believe went all the way to 31st on that side of the road. And I'd have to take a look at this package. Obviously, we have a little bit of frontage there. That's potentially a frontage improvement that's been required, but I'd have to take a look back.
Right, there aren't sidewalks on that side of Marvin Road on this property.
And and as a condition, are they going to put sidewalks in on that bridge?
This project is, because they're not accessing on Marvin Road in that location, they are not installing the sidewalks. They are, however, paying traffic mitigation fees for the Marvin Road project. And so those fees in the future would go to fund that improvement.
So the next project that would be scheduled for there would be the roundabout at Marvin and 31st. And so at that time, that's when sidewalks would be extended south to tie into the, the work that was done as part of that Marvin Road improvement that was started at Britton Parkway and was brought north, that we partnered with Betty on.
Councilor Cox.
This is for Shannon. This is a very heavily forested tract of land. And with the wetland areas that will be preserved, will all that forest around it be preserved as well, all or most of it?
Yes, they're only impacting 6 acres of this property. So the remainder of the property will remain in wetland and forested wetland on the site. So it's a total of 22 acres. So 18 acres will remain forested.
Okay, and then I know, trying to do these maps, it can't be entirely precise, but it looked like the southern boundary of the wetland buffer of the kind of the central wetland in there actually was at or on a building. Is that just a map or?
No, that's actually how that, I can bring it back up if you'd like me to, but that's an existing building. And so when they go out and they map the wetlands, they identify the edge of the wetlands, and then they put a map down. They map out the width of the standard buffer, and that standard buffer goes into that adjacent building. And so that building was probably constructed prior to, the knowledge that that wetland was there on site.
And so are there any stormwater runoff or other consequences there that we
so
should
the
be
wetland,
Are they leaving that building there?
here, let me show you. I'll share my screen again. Okay, so you're talking about wetland D here, right?
Yeah, where the red.
Right, so this is an existing building. I'm not sure what business is there. I think it is maybe owned by Kaufman's, and that's off the property.
Oh.
So the behavioral health hospital will go essentially where wetland C is. And the remainder of wetlands B, wetlands A, and wetlands D will remain as they are with their existing buffers. But this around wetland D is an existing condition with an existing building already in place. So a different property ownership. And like I said, it was probably constructed prior to the knowledge of this wetland being in this location. It may not have been required to do a wetland development permit when it came in for construction. I'm not sure when it was constructed, but no, that's going to remain as it is. So obviously this portion of the buffer doesn't serve any purposes for wetland D at this point. But all stormwater is going to be infiltrated on site. Stormwater associated with the improvements on the behavioral health site will be infiltrated on site. It will be treated, and then it will actually be used, it'll discharge to the wetlands for wetland hydrology to help preserve the wetlands.
Great, thank you.
You can stop sharing your screen. Is there any other questions? So it's amazing that the history of this piece of property and how many different iterations it's gone through, and how we got to this point where we're actually seeing any development on it at all. This was property that at one time was going to be the future Pope John Paul High School, and then it went through a different iteration. And of course, with all these wetlands there, it's sort of been a big issue. Like how are we going to possibly accommodate any sort of development with all the wetlands? And so I really think that hearings examiner has done, and city staff have done just an amazing job here, not only getting an essential service in place, but actually be able to preserve as much of those wetlands as they did, and have the project work. It's just, at one point, we looked at this property and it's like, that will never, it's so complicated to make it all work. And so it just goes to show you the expertise of our staff when it comes to this. And so Sarah and Scott, you guys are rock stars to be able to pull this off. And I think the hearings examiner's recommendations are spot on. So I fully support what we have before us. Given that, if I don't see any other comments, it's been moved and seconded to accept this conditional use permit for Olympia Behavioral Health Project. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion carries and that will go forward. Much needed project. So thank you, staff, for making sure it got done.
Thanks so much.
Next up is under resolutions, and we have a public art policy update from one of my favorite people in the world, Kelly Adams.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and City Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come here today and talk about public art policy. So I am going to share my screen. All right, can you see my presentation?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So today's presentation will cover three basic areas. We'll talk about our funding and policy framework for public art. We will share our staff recommendations, and I'm excited to show our new public art map and planning tool. So our funding framework is made of three elements. The first is Ordinance 1022, which sets aside 1/4% on public construction projects over $500,000. Exemptions to this ordinance are streets and utility projects. Resolution 760, as written, puts aside 25 cents per capita on public art. And our who, what, where, why, and when, our policies and procedures are contained in Chapter 10.09 of Council Policies and Procedures. The first anomaly that we noticed as staff was that what is written and what is practiced are different. And so since 2012, we've actually been putting aside $1 per capita for public art, thus giving us a current balance of $227,000. So this leads to our first staff recommendation, which is to repeal Resolution 760 and to replace it with draft resolution 1105, which is contained in your packet. And two basic changes are that it will update the funding amount to $1 per capita, and it will also include a clause to allow flexibility. And I believe that the language says, to the extent that economic conditions allow. And so although we are increasing, we are also building flexibility into the resolution. Our second recommendation is to update policy 10.09. And these recommendations come directly from the Community Relations and Public Affairs Committee that we presented to in April and just this last month. So we want to update the funding description. We want to expand the objectives, the themes, the approved locations, and we want to clarify the procedures. Our third recommendation comes from looking outward. So we looked at other municipalities, we looked at the state, we looked at counties and how they approach public art. And what we found is that many organizations rely on an arts commission as an advisory body. At this time, that would have a budget impact and would have a staff time impact. So until we have time to do some further research at the direction of council, we recommend that we stick to our ad hoc committee approach. And that's on a project by project basis. And the last project that we used a committee of this structure was the Hawk statue, which is located at the roundabout of Quinault Drive. And so at this time, I want to share, I'm going to do a switcheroo and share my other screen here. And so I'm hoping you can still see this. Yes. So do you see the public art planning tool?
Yes.
Great. So our first page here, this will be on our city website. And this is how the public can engage with our art installations. We have, this is our hawk statue that we were talking about, just in case you haven't seen it in a while. And we want to share some funding, just general funding overview with the public and any other information that council thinks is relevant. And we want to share with them a tour of our public art. And so there are locations on this map. This map is interactive. And wherever you click, it will show you information about the installation. We tried to include information about the artist, the date of installation, any background, and for transparency, we've included cost. And so as you click through, and what we're working on right now, I'm excited about, is getting historic photos, such as I have a photo of this, of the Clue Clock when it was in South Sound Center. So we're pretty excited about the potential here. And I want to show you an example. So when you click on this, you can go through a slideshow and see different perspectives of public art. And so this is our public facing page. And these other tabs will be used to actually conduct the planning. So the green stars on this map are those same art installations from the first tab. And so this map shows us population density. So where are the neighborhoods the most dense in Lacey? And this information will be updated as we get new census data. Looking at things like employment density, and you can see here, this is the Martin Way corridor. Where can we put public art where the most visitors will enjoy it? And this tab is my favorite. So these are the actual public policy elements. So we teased out approved locations, different intents. So for example, all of the purple circles are traffic circles. The yellow squares are main thoroughfares into Lacey. We have parks in green, and these different colored patches here are places like the Woodland, Midtown, the Depot District, different development activity areas. And blue lines are trails. So we're trying to be very data-driven and very intentional about where we put public art as we develop a 6-year plan. Another layer is historical points of interest. And so these are works in progress. What we'd really like to do is not only to add traditional historic data, such as our historic properties, but we also would like to add areas of historic tribal activity. We think that there's a lot of opportunities here. So I will exit out of this, stop sharing my screen, and answer any questions you may have.
Questions, Deputy Mayor?
So are we still allowed to amend the policy by adding another thing? We have, for instance, we have themes, we have objectives. The one thing that I see is totally missing is a sense of fun. Now, some like those bears, they're darling. They are a sense of fun, and they also give the impression of, using the library and stuff. But we also want to make people come by and smile a lot. It's just, so I'm wondering if we can amend that to include something like that that would interface with all the other themes.
Is it fun? Yeah, I like that. What's your thoughts on that, Kelly?
I think a sense of fun is fun. I think it's great. And I think the bears are such a good example because they were paid for by the community. The community came together and collected aluminum cans, recycled them, and that paid for those statues, those carvings.
That's
So
awesome.
Are we going to also sort of reach out? Like, I know, for example, we have some amazing arts over at Panorama, right? We have the,
Yes.
Chihuli's art there and that is spectacular. I don't know if we need permission from Panorama, but if you haven't seen that art, it is breathtaking. It's truly amazing, and the fact that he lived there on Panorama, that the main mentor to Chihuly, it's a really cool history. It's everything, and so I didn't see that listed, but that could be a great addition. I'll go later. Councilmember Seven, do you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to have the council take into consideration public investment in arts. So projects that the community is serious about and embraces are the ones that they will put their funds in personally. So, we should really take a look at projects that are financed, majority by the citizenry or the residents.
I think that's can be definitely an aspect of it too. What I really think, I guess I'll go next. First of all, this is one of the most exciting documents I've seen in a long time. It really is. I've been a huge advocate of public art. Everyone should know that for forever and ever. I think it really, public art is sort of the foundation of your community. It's so important for a sense of identity. And a while back we had a council retreat that really talked about public art and the importance of public art to a community. And we all sort of agreed at that point that should be a priority. And now that the city of Lacey, will be the largest city in Thurston County, it's time for us to grow up and really do the investment we need into our community when it comes to public art, which means I would like to see an arts commission as well. I think I would like staff to give us a recommendation of what that would take to implement from a budget standpoint. And I like Troy and Scott to take a look at it, and I would love for that to come back from council for a decision at some point, sooner than later, because an arts commission is the next step in this. What you've laid out here, Kelly, is awesome. I'm 100% in support of it, and an arts commission should be help leading this as well. In fact, do you still have your hand up, Councilor Seven?
Yeah, I forgot to mention also, it could be a tourist attraction as well. That's very important. Maybe not to the likes of Notre Dame or something like that, but if people would come to visit our town if we have the proper attractions and a little bit of everything for everybody.
Yeah, well, and again, continuing to work with St. Martin's University too, right? They're a big player when it comes to this as well, and that Arts Commission should be working with the university. Councilmember Cox.
Well, I couldn't agree more about one thing. It seems to me a few years ago, I heard that Olympia's Art Commission might be interested in working with us. And if so, and if the council is receptive to that and their council is receptive to that, there might be a partnership we could explore there that would not require us to start from the ground up. So that's one thing. I think public art, we are trying to be a city, a grown-up city. And one of the things that distinguishes a city are the districts that, public art, things that people take pride in and enjoy and want to come and visit. And I think everything we can do, I love the fun theme, but everything we can do to embrace public art within budget, we should do. I do want to bring up one point that was raised in the public affairs meeting last week. I believe Councilmember Stedman had left the meeting by that point, but Councilmember Kunkel was asking the question of whether we might entertain spending some of this public art money on the Gold Star Families Memorial that they're trying to fundraise for. And I said I'd be willing to entertain it, but I'd kind of like to get a sense from the rest of the council about whether that's what is intended to do.
I think I would love to hear a presentation about that memorial. I don't necessarily think that has to be funded by these funds. I think that's something we can take a look at. And I'd love to be able to take a look at it, but I don't. I think that I'd love to see a presentation first from all that. Councilmember Greenstein.
I was just going to add, I think that would be a very appropriate use for some of the funds, particularly that they are doing considerable fundraising from the public. So there is a public investment in this project. And I do think it would fall under the public art, and it would be something that people would want to see and would come to see. So I think it does fall in that category. So I'd be very supportive of that. And I'm supportive of this in its entirety. I think you did a great job, Kelly.
Thank you, Council Member.
So yeah, I'm supportive of course, of the memorial as well. I would like to get presentation so we can get the whole, hear where they're at in the process and how we can support it,
Right.
For sure. But where's everyone with directing staff to look at the Arts Commission, the next steps in the Arts Commission? I really would like that to be a next step. I know it's a process, but I'd like to direct staff to take that next step to do that. Do we have some consensus there? Yes. It
would depend on cost. I'm supportive. It just depends on what the cost is. I know Kelly's proposal was ad hoc, doing it on a project by project basis, as we've done in the past, which I think works. But if we could, if it's not a big expense, then I'd be open to it.
Yeah.
What you're really talking about, of course, is the staff time to pull it together, to pull meetings together, to direct it, and then a lot of those arts commissions, there's a public side of it too, right? And so it's a private side of it too for all that. So I think it's time. I know it will take some staff time, but I would like to see what that would take and take a look so we can make a informed decision when it comes to budget time.
So quick question.
Councilmember Miller, and I'll go back to you, Deputy Mayor.
I think public art does a lot for a city. We all know the Troll Under the Bridge. Most of us have probably been there. And even if you haven't been to the Bean in Chicago, it's there. A lot of cities are oftentimes identified by their public art. I've never been to the Arch in St. Louis. I know it's there, and I know when I see it, I think St. Louis. And so that small demonstration there is enough to show you that public art plays a big role in a city's identification. So if we can pull it off, that'd be fantastic. And the numbers work, and we can afford to do it, then I would be for it too. Great.
Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
So my question is, so we can move forward, do I need to amend the
public art policy?
Yeah, the public art policy, and make a motion to amend it with adding adding fund to it, or whatever I said?
Kelly, what do you think the best way to go forward on that? I mean, I think you see our consensus on that. So
yes, I think just amending that motion to include the language that you would like to be put in the policy. I think we have a general sense of it, but for the sake of officially approving that.
So what suggestions? It's be difficult to just go right at the top of your head. Let's.
Wouldn't it just fall under though? I mean, so that you wouldn't have to amend the policy, being that you kind of have the consensus of council supporting the concept. Couldn't it just fall under a theme without having to go policy, really?
Yeah,
David?
I think so too. What do you think, Dave? What do you think, Dave?
I think that's right. I think the motion could be to simply adopt the policy with some included language, articulate, encapsulating what council's been discussing. And I think city staff could certainly add that in there.
Okay.
And another
Scott,
brief.
So Scott, do you have something too?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you captured, I think even Kelly said a sense of fun. I think that's the perfect phrase. I think that adds into paragraph 1, and you just include that in as one of the priorities to look at with future art projects.
Yes.
That would be the intent.
Well, then I would make a motion to approve the adoption of the updated public art policy, including that language regarding fun under themes, and the adoption of the resolution 1101 to the City Council establishing an annual public art fund contribution amount of $1 per capita. Is there a second? So moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Deputy Mayor?
Sorry, do we have to put in that motion about rescinding that other 706 or whatever it is? No.
Well, I think this resolution, this resolution rescind the other one, Dave?
Well, there's two separate motions, correct? One would be adopting the policy, and then the second action would be to adopt the resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to answer your question, by approving the resolution, it does repeal the prior resolution.
Oh, correct. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood that. Yes.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought as well.
My bad.
Okay.
If I can, Mayor, I do have some concerns with fun, even though I like to think I'm the funnest person on this council.
You are pretty fun.
My concern is not all art and culture is fun. And we have some dark histories, but it's also becomes history, and us as who've traveled over to Poland know of a lot of their public arts is something that's some cultures culture shouldn't be proud of, but it's still art and it's remembrance and all that. Does it make sense?
I think the public art, I understand where you're coming from. This is just the one that's themes that it could be, and so I think the rest of the public art policy hits on those other things as well. This is just an additional thing, not to exclude.
And I get it and I support it. I just wanted to make sure that was we're all aware of the flip side of art and stuff. So
it says one or more.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're still have it covered in our art policy. And of course, every policy is a living document, and if changes need to happen in the future, then changes will happen. Kelly?
And if I may, there will be a general council policies and procedures update agenda item in the future. So we have a general update for all the council policies and procedures. So if we approve this tonight and we look at this and it's not right and it does need something a little more, we can revisit this at that general update.
Perfect. Well, then it's we have a motion and a second to adopt this updated public art policy with suggested language, and also the adoption of the resolution 1105. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then the motion carries. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor.
Now we'll go on to ordinances. I think Scott, you say that we're going to take up all ordinances at the same time?
So what?
592, 593?
So Troy's going to go through all the presentations, but you still have to do each ordinance one at a time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. As Scott said, we'd like this presentation to basically cover the next 3 items on your agenda. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, hopefully you could see my presentation. To give a little background on how we got here, especially for the members of our audience and the public, as the council and staff developed the 2021 budget, the council deferred action on 2021 utility rates to provide COVID-19 financial relief, as well as to give some time to have a clearer view of the full financial impacts of the public health emergency. So here we are at the mid-year point of 2021, and for your consideration tonight are three different rate ordinances. The council has had multiple work session topics on this very item, and we have reviewed several different scenarios, and this is what we believe the council has wanted to see here for tonight. So I'll start off with looking at the current utility bill for a typical residential home in Lacey. I will point out that I revised this slide to show the usage of 700 cubic feet. So the amount you might remember from last week is slightly lower. So using 700 cubic feet, a typical residential property in Lacey pays $104.21. I will point out that LOT did adopt a 3% rate increase that was effective January 1st. So that was really the only change that occurred so far for 2021. In looking at the proposed rates before you tonight, the proposed rate increases are 4.5% for stormwater, 5% for sewer, and 5% for water. That is reflected in this slide here. Again, this is based on 700 cubic feet of water consumption. So if the council does support this and move forward with those rate increases, a typical home may pay $107.25. This is an increase of about $3.04. I do want to show a comparison with some of our neighboring jurisdictions. I believe Councilmember Miller requested to see this. It's always good to take a look to see what's happening around us as kind of a way to check in terms of reasonableness. But as we've discussed in the past, these various utility systems are very different and unique and have different needs and are drawing from different types of assets. So they are very different, but for comparison purposes, we do like to check in. I basically took the comparison that you saw from our consultant, the FCS group, back at the end of May. And I basically just inserted the proposed increases that we've talked about. Water, you can see Lacey's current rate there with the black column at $31.56. A 5% increase would move the Lacey monthly bill up to $33.14. And I will point out that these rates do include the utility tax that the city levies. It's basically more of a fair comparison to our neighboring water providers. I did the same thing for sewer. Again, you see the current rate next to the proposed rate there in red. For sewer, this is about $1.10, again, 5% increase. This does include the lot portion of the sewer bill. And then looking at stormwater, again, the same basic color scheme for the various jurisdictions. Here you could see the stormwater rate as a 4.5% increase, and it's without taxes, about 53 cents per month. I do want to walk through this slide again. The council, of course, have seen various iterations of this slide, but I do want to make this available to the public so they could follow along with some of the logic and the discussion that the city council has had. And I really want to focus on what they're at the top at scenario 1 with scenario 3, which is what is proposed before the council tonight. So scenario one is basically a no action scenario. So no rate increase for 2021. And you could see through the next 6 years, 2022 through 2027, the draft comp plan for water is proposing 6.5% rate increases per year through that period. And then when you compare that with scenario three, which is the 5% rate increase that the council has directed staff to prepare ordinances for, you could see that the 6-year annual rate increase drops about 1.25% down to 5.25% per year. So a pretty significant difference. It also lowers the amount of debt that is required through the 6 years by $1.5 million. And so this is a really a good illustration of the city's historical approach of keeping level, predictable annual rate increases for utilities. So rather than seeing a zero increase for this year and jumping up to 6.5, you see more of a level schedule for rate increases. Here's basically the same information, but for sewer. Again, scenario one, you have a no rate increase scenario for 2021. The comp plan for sewer is not scheduled for an update until 2023, but we did ask our rate consultant to put together a rate recommendation. And so the no rate increase in 2021, the proposal would be a 10.5% annual increase through 2022 through 2027. And again, if you focus on scenario three, which is the 5% increase that the council has directed to prepare, you don't see the same impact from the annual increases looking out into the future, but it does bring down the annual increase by 1% per year. So it definitely makes a difference, but you don't have the same level annual increase through that period. But certainly makes a difference in making a half or mid-year adjustment. For sewer in scenario three, it also decreases the debt need by $1.5 million throughout that period. So for your consideration tonight, you do have three different rate ordinances, one for each of our utilities, so stormwater, sewer, and water. Again, the ordinances are drafted with a 4.5% increase for stormwater, 5% for sewer, and 5% for water. I did include here on the slide the impacts it will have in the future multi-year rate proposals. We're not asking you to act on that at this point, but to consider this with the 2022 budget development. But I do want to, obviously make sure the public is aware that, this is coming before the council. And I believe, as Councilmember Greenstein pointed out, that this is really the worst case scenario in looking at the multi-year rates. Part of the reasoning for delaying a multi-year consideration is we do know that there are discussions happening at the federal level for significant infrastructure funding, and we want to make sure we take advantage of that before we commit to long-term rates. So hopefully we'll see some resolution with that at the federal level as we head into the budget season this fall, and we could have more of a full picture for the council in terms of what to look for in the future. So again, you do have three ordinances before you. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have before you make those considerations.
I know we had a work session where this was discussed, and I know we directed staff to bring this before us today. I didn't really speak up in that last work session. To tell you the truth, I'm actually having a hard time going with a 5% increase here. There's the reason why we're doing a 5% increase is because of the CIP plan on being funded 100% in the out years. There's so much unknown when it comes to federal funding, possible federal funding, that our rate is going to be widely possibly change depending on what other opportunities we have. You know, and I'm having a hard time increasing our rates this much based on a worst case scenario. I know, Troy, you always do your conservative, you know, calculations here, but you know, this is a big expense for a lot of people, and I'm just having I've been struggling with this whole time, and now that we're down to it, I'm really struggling with it. So, Councilman Greenstein.
What I would say to that though is keep in mind that the 5% is not to fund for the worst case. It's to lower the future increases, right? We know that we're going to have a 6-year plan with increases. The idea of this 5% now rather than 3% now was to lessen the effects of the swing, right? Having 5% now, continuing with 5%, doing 3 now, and having bigger jumps in future years. So it's just to help level it off.
And you'd be absolutely right if there's no federal funding coming to us in the out years, right? And so that's why you're doing the 5% now, because that's based on no federal dollars coming to us, and to do our capital improvement plan at 100% of it. You want to lower the risk going forward, but we don't know what the risk is going to be yet. Deputy Mayor, you're on mute.
I know. It takes me a while to find it. So Lenny's correct. I mean, Council Member Greenstein's correct, but we can always, if we get federal funding, we can always go back and change it again, right, Troy? I mean, we're not locked into keeping the rate at 5% if we get funding later on, but we don't know for sure if it will come down. I mean, so we're sort of playing with ifs for the federal government and ifs for the other. And so it seems to me that we ought to at least level it out to begin with, and then go back if we get more federal dollars. That's
Sure.
2%.
You know, I think my crystal ball says we're not going to receive federal funding for every dollar of CIP. So, you know, that would be, I think, unrealistic to consider. You know, I think what would happen is we would look at that multi-year rate, and it would, you know, bring those rates down. So kind of to Councilmember Greenstein's and Deputy Mayor's point, it's really an investment in buying down that future rate. I would be very surprised if the federal monies were at that level, that it would significantly move that needle.
Mm-hmm. Scott, I'm sure you want to come in here.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we don't know what, you know, the federal funding will bring, but I can tell you that it's been years since there's really been any good federal funding related to water and wastewater utilities. You know, you've seen where the initial proposals have already been knocked down over $1 trillion. A lot of what I've seen in terms of water infrastructure is geared towards lead and copper, which really isn't going to do much for our water CIP. So we do have a very large CIP coming. We'll need the resources to build it, but every project is necessary and will need to be built approximately when it's listed. And you know, just an example of the challenges that we're facing is that steel prices are, you know, at an all-time high, yet we're poised to go out to advertise for the Terry Cargill Reservoir. And we've got a meeting scheduled with our consultant to evaluate the various courses of action. You know, if everybody puts their projects on hold, when the prices come down, there's going to be increased demand, lack of contractors, and prices are going to go up anyway. And then that's just a cost consideration. Then we also have to look at the impacts of delaying projects If we delay that project, which is necessary for our system, then that delays our ability to go and fix our Hawkesbury water treatment system. Our Hawkesbury reservoir, which we're building the sister standpipe to allow us to do that. All this to say, we made these projections at a point in time. Costs are going up. There's a lot of moving factors. My recommendation is to stay the course. And if by chance we do get a lot of federal funding, it can help buy down debt service, and you can potentially lower the rates when you know you have it. But to go with a lesser amount now, if we don't get that funding, is going to drive the rates up later. So anyway, that's my food for thought.
Well, as a public works director, I think you did a good job advocating for your projects there. And
well, thank you.
I get it. And I did miss the presentation about all the capital improvement projects that are in the works. And so maybe I do think it's sort of important that the public hear that too, and see those projects and see those projected dollar amounts, because we are going to be asking our citizens to pay what will be looks like the highest rates in Thurston County. And granted, we have different needs. I get that. I'm just saying it's I've always been pretty it always hurts when I see these rates on utilities, maybe because I also own a business, and they all get magnified when you're as a business owner as well, and so maybe I'm a little biased on when it comes to that as too. Obviously, I'm going to go with the majority of where the council is, and you're probably right. 5% makes more sense in the long term. I just said I've been having a hard time stomaching it. Doesn't mean I'm not going to support it. It means I'm having a hard time stomaching it. Is there any other? Let's go, Councilmember Greenstein, and we'll go to Councilmember Cox.
I was just going to make a motion to approve Ordinance 1591, the 2021 stormwater rate, because as I believe we need separate motions for each.
We do. Is there a second?
Second.
So moving second. Is there a discussion? Mike, you have your hand up?
Yeah. The reason why I sought City Council is because we can make the biggest and most positive impact the quickest. And though I can't stomach any increases that just adds additional burdens to residents, I think this has the biggest and most positive impact in the big picture, and for the future, and the compounding effect it will have will positively impact every individual in the city, every ratepayer. So having said that, though none of us like it, that's why I support it.
Councilor Cox? You're on mute.
I was where you are tonight, one meeting ago on this. And once I saw the whole presentation, saw the difference in the amounts that ratepayers would pay, and how relatively small a difference 3% and 5% is, but the big difference it makes down the line, it started making more sense to me, because I gulped when I saw a 5% rate increase.
Me too.
It also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Egger, but I think I heard at that presentation that probably would be less borrowing that we would have to do as well.
That's correct.
Is Troy, yes. And so, putting all those pieces together, I think ultimately this is the best deal for Lacey residents. So I'm going to be voting yes.
Is there any other discussion?
But one last thing, it's like retirement. You don't wait until you're 60 to start saving up for it. And this is kind of goes along the same lines of, or same ideology.
just, like I said, I hope we can give some good presentations to the public on where these dollars are going to and why we're asking for this rate increase, because the public, it's one thing that we know about it, but it's the other thing that the public sees it and understands it as well. So I think that's going to be important for us to do.
Yeah,
I struggled with it in the last couple meetings too, and gave it a lot of thought between then and now. It's a painful move, being somebody who's on city water, city sewer, all that kind of fun stuff like that. Not just thinking about myself, but my neighbors and so on. It unfortunately has to be done because we can't, we can afford debt service in the future even if we don't do this. However, it's just going to hurt more later than it is now, which is very similar with, the slight tax increase, property tax increase that we did earlier this year. It was only 25 cents a house, but it needed to be done so that we could keep up. And in this case, it looks like it's going to save us potentially millions by making this move now. And so I will reluctantly, be saying yes as well.
Is there any other discussion? Then it's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 1591, setting our 2021 stormwater rate. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to adopt 1592?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 1592, setting the 2021 sewer rate. Is there any discussion?
I have
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
one quick discussion point. So my assumption, because this is partly to deal with the septic to sewer thing, is there a subcategory where you slide some of the money into it to help with that or not?
Are you referring to like a separate accounting of the funds? Like,
well, yeah, when we talked about it earlier, it was with or without septic to sewer. And then we all agreed that it has to include that. But how do you account for including that so that it is
That's a good
usable?
question.
Does that make sense?
sure, yeah,
Absolutely.
I think I know where some of the confusion is, because the council for the last couple of years has talked about a separate rate and a separate CIP for these projects. But with the new structure, the septic abatement projects have basically just been folded into CIP. So it's just like any other construction improvement project. It just goes on the schedule and is paid for through rates. So it's just like any other project. So I guess in short, no, there's not a separate accounting for that. But we, definitely know in terms of, Capital City, our first project, and then moving forward, the basic level of what that funding level is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But do we have like the full outline of priorities? What's next? Discussion along those? We still need to have that discussion. I know this is starting to fund that, but we haven't really got into the policy discussion of who's next after Capital Cities, so on and so forth. Right.
That's correct. I'll kind of weigh in. We need to have probably one more work session to just talk about, theirs would be the next steps. There is a neighborhood that's sort of kind of front and center that we need to deal with. I need some final clarity on that. And then Scott and I have talked, we need to give you kind of a 30,000 foot level, say this is how the approach we're going to take. But by your action tonight, we would have the ability to have a program going into the future.
Okay.
Okay. That's good. And I look forward to that discussion. It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 1592, setting the sewer rates for 2021. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? That motion carries. I'll move that we adopt ordinance 1593, setting the 2021 water rate. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, Deputy Mayor.
So yes, I do. on this, and I think it's this is the water rates, right? Page 2, it said you have 1, 2, and 3, and then it says a construction improvement plan, including septic to sewer projects with a 5% rate increase. I guess my question is, because this is water and not sewer, why would it have that in it?
We're doing both to help with a program, right?
Sure. There's a component of water quality and protection of aquifer in terms of eliminating septic tanks. And so using the Capital City project, we're really able to use that as, as an example in terms of trying to determine what percentage is water quality versus what becomes a sewer responsibility. And we really ended up with a kind of a 40-60% split in terms of 40% for water. So again, this is really to protect our water source in the end. So it does make sense for water to pay a portion of those projects.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Any other discussion? See none. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Then the motion carries. Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Scott.
Great. You're welcome.
Then the next ordinance is the solid waste management plan and flow control. So it's going over to Shannon.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council members. I am here tonight to present 2 items. First is a solid waste interlocal agreement between the city and Thurston County. And then the second is an ordinance, that's Ordinance 1594 for consideration for adoption. And this ordinance would amend the Lacey Municipal Code, Section 804040, and it would include disposal site language, which would incorporate the concept of flow control, which I'll get into more detail here in just a second. I am joined here tonight by Karen Weiss, who is the Interim Solid Waste Division Manager for Thurston County, as well as Wendy Mifflin, who is the Senior Planner at HDR Inc. And they are here to provide any technical questions that this body may have about these 2 items. Just to provide a brief overview, pursuant to state law, all cities and counties in the state are mandated to adopt and implement comprehensive solid waste plans. The city has authority over solid waste handling, including the authority to designate disposal sites for waste collected within its boundaries. And it also authorizes the city to enter into agreements with public or private parties for purposes of solid waste handling. Historically, the cities and towns in Thurston County have exercised this option under the state law to participate in joint county municipality integrated solid and hazardous waste management programming with Thurston County. This effort has resulted in the creation of the Thurston County Solid Waste Management Plan, also the SWMP, as well as the Hazard Waste Plan. The city is a member of the Thurston County Solid Waste Advisory Committee, the SWAC, and the SWAC participates in the creation of that solid waste management plan. Lacey Councilmember Michael Stedman served as Lacey's representative on the SWAC during the development of the solid waste management plan update for 2021 to 2026. In January 2021, the SWAC recommended that that plan move forward for adoption by the participating cities and towns. Included in that update, as well as the ordinance in front of you, is the provision for flow control. So just some background on flow control. This is the legal basis for local governments to designate the locations where municipalities can take solid waste for processing, treatment, and control. And Thurston County adopted a flow control ordinance back in December 2020. And this ordinance specifies that solid waste generated in Thurston County must remain in Thurston County. There is, however, an exception with residential self-haul of solid waste. This is not subject to penalties that are set forth within the county's flow control ordinance. This means that residential self-haul can transport and dispose of waste outside of the county. This language that was in the county's flow control ordinance is also integrated into the language in front of you today, as far as it's in the interlocal agreement. It's also incorporated into the ordinance that is in front of you. On March 23rd, 2021, Ms. Weiss and Ms. Mifflin provided the General Government and Public Safety Committee with an update on the plan, as well as an update on flow control. The committee recommended that these two items, the interlocal agreement, as well as the ordinance that are in front of you today, go to the full Lacey City Council for consideration. It's recommended tonight that we, this body, number one, authorize the city manager to enter into a local agreement, and then two, adopt ordinance 1594. I know myself, Ms. Weiss and Ms. Mifflin would be happy to answer any questions this body might have about these two items.
Can I get a motion, please?
So I'm not sure if we do it separately or not, but I authorized the city manager to enter into an interlocal agreement for Thurston County Solid Waste Management and Solid Waste Management Plan and Hazardous Waste Plan updates between Thurston County and the city of Lacey.
And you can do them both.
You want me to do them both? And that we adopt ordinance 1594 to relate to solid waste management, designating Thurston County solid waste system to solid waste originating in the city, amending section 8.04.040 of the Lacey Municipal Code and approving a summary for publication.
I would second.
It's been moved and seconded. Dave?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out a real quick clarification. In the agenda packet, section 1 of the ordinance, it does not show the edits. So just for council's information, all of section B under disposal is new text that has been added to the LMC. So that's the amendment that's taking place. All of the content is spot on. The motion that council made will adopt the correct ordinance. I just wanted to make that clarification for council, or at least the agenda packet that I have that I'm looking at online.
You're right. It doesn't show up in mine either. And I do want to thank the city manager for asking for this clarification. Right, and we at general government we had received a presentation and it was sort of silent on this. And so we had a discussion and said, hey, can we, instead of it being silent, can we just make sure it's written out so there's no people guessing about it in the future, and so it's squared away. And so I really appreciate the additional work that's been done to this, so it's clear. It was before it was sort of surmised that was the case, but I think having the clarification makes a lot more sense. So I appreciate that. Councilmember Stedman, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I would say, after serving on this committee for several years, not just as a vice chair, but as a chair, we have vetted this process, very well. There's no stone that hasn't been unturned. And having said that, though at times I was skeptical, and at other times I was very, very supportive. We've got through all that as a body, and it's a good plan, and it's got a good flow control and all that. So I just wanted to say that it's been well vetted. A lot of concerns have been addressed, and this is a huge thing, not just for the county, but the city. And for the county, solid waste is its biggest budget item. It deserves the time and the process. So I'll be supporting this. The SWAC committee had approved this. They support it. So I think that carries a lot of weight, because there's a lot of people on that from all over the county, all different walks of life, and it affects each person in different demographic a little bit differently. So, so for what it's worth, I support this.
Thank you, Mike, and I appreciate all the work you put into this as well as of course, as Vice Chair and Chair. And I know that this has been something very, near and dear to your heart when you put a lot of work into it. So it's much appreciated. Is there any other discussion? It's been moved and second to authorize the city manager to enter into this local agreement and to also adopt ordinance 1594 relating to solid waste management. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then the motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you, Council. I'd like to say thank you and really thank you again to Councilmember Stedman for all of the hard work he put into helping us put this plan together. We really appreciate the longstanding cooperative relationship we've had with the city on solid waste management. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would say, Karen and Wendy are absolutely amazing at what they do and knowing their profession and really educating us all on the importance of solid waste and management. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Council.
Next up on our agenda is the timing of payment of connection fees. Scott.
All right. Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council.
City Manager, do you have something?
Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I do not. Go ahead, Scott Egger. Sorry.
Okay.
The other Scott. The other.
Good evening. In order to provide a bit of relief to large development projects, staff is recommending that council approve an ordinance to change the timing of payment of utility connection fees. The proposed ordinance will change the timing of payment of water and wastewater general facility charges, as well as lots capacity development charge from the time of building permit to just prior to final public works approval and prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy. So this change applies to multifamily, commercial, and industrial projects, to large projects. The change does not apply to single family residential projects. Multifamily, commercial, industrial projects can take upwards of 2 years to complete, and changing the timing of payment of the fees may provide some financial relief in terms of cash flow and potentially interest. So one thing to keep in mind, the fees will be paid at the rate that is in place at the time of payment. Therefore, the developers will have to consider timing of payment as our fees are increased annually based on inflation. So our municipal code states the inflation rate is based on the Engineering News Record Construction Index. And so they'd have to weigh that against, the interest rates they can get for loans. The reason the proposed ordinance doesn't apply to single family residential projects is that the fees are small for single family in comparison to the larger projects. As an example, Gateway Multifamily out on Martin Way, its connection fees for combined water and sewer were north of $900,000. So, and those, as we noted, those projects take longer in time to construct, whereas a house could be, a month to 2 months. They go up pretty fast. And we have had problems in the past. It's been quite some time, but we had homes that were occupied before the connection fees were paid. And then that's really problematic to correct. One last item that I want to point out is this change will create a difference in the terms in our interlocal with lot and our municipal code. The interlocal states that fees will be paid at the time of building permit. And we're changing this to, to the just prior to occupancy. But anyway, so Dave Schneider, our city attorney, communicated that given the nature of this interlocal, that we really have jurisdictional authority here to make this change. Additionally, that there was a difference in the language between the LMC and the interlocal when the interlocal was initially signed. And the bottom line is this will not create any reduction or change in fees that lot collects. And I'm gonna, just so you can see the language in the interlocal. So here's our interlocal with lot. I'm gonna go to the financial section. So here you have Lot Wastewater Alliance Finance section, lot rates and charges. if you go to the capacity development charge in the financial section of the ILA, it says all capacity development charges shall be paid to lot with the partner's next monthly payment following the month in which the charges are collected. But back in the definition section, where you wouldn't normally find anything related to term, says a capacity development charge means a one-time connection charge collected at issuance of building permit. So I just wanted to point that out. I mean, typically items related to term and finance are located in the financial section of the contract. And I don't know, Dave, if you want to add some more background here.
I would like to add just one note. In 2000, when this interlocal agreement with lot for lot, when the interlocal agreement with the other jurisdictions was signed, at that time, Lacey's municipal code required payment at the time of connection. Subsequent to that, I believe it was 2010, 11, I don't recall, but well past that, the city council on its own changed their code to make it do a time of building permit. So we're kind of reverting to how it was when the lot was interlocal was signed. At any rate, the fix here is just a simple cleanup with the interlocal to just slightly amend the definition of what capacity development charge is.
But that's gonna to change the interlocal. We need them to accept it as well. Has lot been notified, and are they willing to accept this, Deputy Mayor? That this is up your alley.
Yes, actually they do know, and Scott has talked to Michael Stroop. So all they care about is getting paid. It doesn't, they don't track when it happens based on when we collect the money. We just give it to them. But the thing is, we're going to be looking at some changes to the ILA coming up anyway. So it's going to be somewhat opened up to have to do some both minor things and a few larger things anyway. So that can be corrected at that time.
I would categorize this as a housekeeping item.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a major change.
Michael didn't seem at all concerned about it.
No, I mean, obviously it just should be collected before there's an impact on the system, right? And so
right,
makes total sense.
That's what he said.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know whether it's a building permit or at the time of when. They just know that it's due, right?
So right. So the as you said, Mayor, the fees will be paid prior to the use of sewer. Yeah, and that's what they care about.
Which makes sense. I think it's so awesome that you guys caught that. I mean, I've heard that this is. Could you imagine having to come up with that $900,000 and your project isn't even go online for another couple of years? And so now you're. I don't know how developers do it. It's just absolutely amazing to me, and it doesn't make any sense. Like to me, it's like as soon as they're right before there's an impact to the system, that's when you need to collect it. Now then, that makes total sense to be able to collect it and pay for that, and there won't be an impact to the system for another couple of years. Just doesn't seem right at all. Deputy Mayor,
us holding their money instead of them holding it.
Yeah.
So at first I had a note saying why not the other structures or the residential and stuff. But when you explained that, you put up a house maybe in 2 months or something, that makes sense. And it's small amount and stuff. It makes sense not to worry about that, to do it at the building permit rather than the other. But because that was my question.
What about for duplexes? Scott, is duplex considered multifamily?
No. It's duplexes are not considered multifamily. But there again, you can build a duplex as fast as a large house. So so going back, Dave mentioned that this had been changed. At one time, it was at time of occupancy or certificate of occupancy, and it was moved back. The reason it was moved back was for water tracking, because when they paid their connection fees, they were issued their meter. So we had a lot of unaccounted for water. But it was during that time when they didn't have to pay these things up until just prior to occupancy is when we had the issue with people occupying houses and, you know, these things prior to connection fees being paid.
So how's that work during the developments? Because obviously a big apartment complex comes on, they need access to water. Is there a meter that comes, you start metering it right away? They're just not paying for it, right?
So yeah, so the way this has changed, the wording, what it allows is they will purchase the meter up front. So the water will be tracked, but the general facility charge will not be charged till the end. So the water will be tracked.
So water will still be tracked in this circumstance. They just won't pay the GFC.
Right.
Okay. Councilmember Cox. Oh, you're on mute.
I did it again. I'd like to ask a devil's advocate question or two. One is, have we talked with Lot about overall big picture? I mean, I'm greatly in sympathy with the builders on this, but is this going to cause any sort of a hardship for Lot in terms of being able to have their infrastructure ready to handle a large project and what it would do to the system? And B, are they just, you know, do they know about this interlocal and are they on board with it?
So Lot has a pretty deluxe capital improvement plan in place. And, you know, our planning is the same as ours. You know, we look at expected growth. We don't look at specific projects, and we have to plan out, say, 20 years in advance. And it's based on the projected growth that's provided by planning, TRPC and others. And, you know, so then they do the same thing we do. They develop capital projects and a timing for those and the need to meet that growth and that demand. You know, and then they calculate what their rates and their capacity development charges will be. So this won't have an impact. And when I talk to Mike Strube, I mean, and as the deputy mayor noted, you know, they don't track when we issue building permits. They don't track when we issue certificates of occupancy. You know, that's all behind the curtain to them. So, you know, they will receive payment for this prior to the facilities coming online. And as I mentioned, the developer will pay the fees that are in place at the time they make payment. So if they, you know, I'll just pull some numbers out of the air, but say it takes them 2 years to construct this, you know, they could say have the choice of borrowing money at, we'll just say 2%, but each year our connection fee is going up based on that engineering news record construction cost index. So there is a cost to them to wait, and Lot will be paid the fee that's in place at the time they make the payment. So they're made whole. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely does. Thank you.
Sure.
I was just going to add is that one of the reasons why they kind of make sure they have this gradual increase is because they have to look at like something like $30 million project or a $100 million project out to 50 years that they know is coming on there 20 to 50 years. So they automatically plan, and there's design work, there's all those other kinds of things that go along with it.
I move approval of ordinance number 1595, timing of payment of utility connection charges.
I second it.
Thank you, council member. Appreciate the motion. In the second, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Then the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next on our agenda is it's the mayor's report. I'm sorry, I just X'd out my No, yep, it is the mayor's report, and I have the one motion to, I move that we reappoint Chad Carpenter to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. I'm sorry, this sort of slipped through the hoops here. He's this should have happened sooner. We just sort of missed it, and so he's up for his second term. He's done a really great job. Obviously, Councilmember Miller, you've worked with him on the LTAC committee, and so this is one of the positions that's mandated by the state law that authorized lodging tax, that one of the recipients of the lodging tax be on the LTAC committee, and that's why Chad Carpenter is the representative, and he's the representative of the Washington Center as well. So that is why Chad's on this committee, and that's why I'm reappointing him to another term. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? And Chad, you've officially been reappointed to the LTAC committee, and I know you guys have a meeting coming up here pretty soon, so appreciate it. And that's it for my mayor's report. Mr. City Manager.
So Honorable Mayor and City Council just have one item, and that's the master interlocal agreement with Thurston County for roadway maintenance and repair. We have Tyson Polk is going to provide that information to you.
Good evening, Honorable Council. City staff recommends Council authorizing the city manager to sign the master interlocal agreement with Thurston County. Basically what this agreement does, it allows cooperation on a reimbursable basis for joint roadway maintenance and repair projects. So for example, the Carpenter Road overlay project, which jogs in and out of the county, is one that we're going to be doing this summer that is under the current interlocal agreement, which expires June 28th. And so, yeah, this wouldn't be used for like roadway rebuilds or, like roadway widening projects. It's strictly for maintenance and repair projects. The agreement is identical to the previous agreement, so there's been no language change from the last agreement. It has a 5-year term and a $300,000 per year limit, which was set to match the Public Works Small Works roster limits. And I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Again, motion.
I move that we approve the master ILA with Thurston County for projects.
Okay.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? And the motion carries. Anything else, Mr. City Manager?
No, there's not.
Thanks. We'll go on to standing general committees. First, Transportation Committee.
Yeah, Transportation Committee met June 1st at 11 a.m. We had a Transportation Benefit District report, which was kind of a summary and a budget of what has happened in 2020. As you guys know, in 2020, we didn't have an entirely lot of projects. We had projects queued up, but the only really one of them that affected this report, which was the Meridian and Orion project at a cost of $1.44 million to the transportation budget. And the remaining amount carried over. So currently we are at 5.37 million going into 2021, which leads us to our next. Well, I guess I could tell you about the projects. The 2021 overlay project, Marvin Road, between Main Street, Willamette, the Orion Drive section, and replacing various manhole and water valve frames, lids, and asphalt patches through the city. So the 2021 projects that are on the tip. Let's just get to that section here, which was our second to last agenda item. We did go over the 6-year transportation improvement program, also known as the TIP. And of the projects on there, 2 have been awarded, and 1 under construction, which is the electric vehicle charging stations. The awarded projects include the College Street Corridor Phase 4, the 29th Street Roundabout, and the citywide signal ITS detection upgrades are the awarded projects. The remaining projects that are planned and that are on accumulate to come out to about 165 million. So the 20 basis points that we've been able to add to fund the district are being well used. As you guys know, the city wastes no money, and you know, our Troy is amazing. Our budget is tight. Roger and Scott do very good jobs of planning these out, and Aubrey does an amazing job of overseeing execution. And that is my report for the transportation meeting that we had on June 1st.
Thank you. Now we're going on to boards, commissions, and committee reports. And just as I was preparing to give my report, my phone died that has all my notes on it for my committee. So I'll give my reports next meeting. So I'll turn over to Deputy Mayor.
So LOT met in the evening of June 9th. And for the work session, we had a discussion on bond refunding. Staff has been negotiating a $41,334,069.20 bond with Columbia State Bank to refund bonds issued in 2011, as well as 3 loans from the Department of Ecology. And we would save $300,000 per year for a total of approximately 3.8 million because there is a favorable interest and it frees up restricted funds. It would reduce also our compliance requirements for the loans with Department of Ecology. We had an update on Ecology's general permit, and the comment period for the Puget Sound general permit began June 16th and ends in August. And LOT feels really well because of the requirements of the permit. We're already doing it anyway. So unlike some of the wastewater treatment plants up north who are quite concerned about it. We had a presentation on where we are at the with our reclaimed water study, and the next phase of the study will be brought to the board in August. And then we had also a presentation on the EIS for the Deschutes Capitol Lake project, what they will choose. And obviously no decision is yet made. For our business meeting, we passed resolution 21-001 concerning the bond refunding we just discussed at our work session. And we had an overview of our pilot team's activities. And these are innovative pilot programs to check whether they will be productive in incorporating into LOT to 1, save money, 2, to save energy, and 3, to help LOT with currently with construction needs. So, and some of those projects were really pretty interesting. Some of them didn't work at all, what they found out, but they're just these short little projects to try them out. We also had a presentation on our knowledge management program, which ensures that key technical knowledge is being captured, documented, and shared in a systematic and effective manner. The Olympic Region Clean Air Agency, or ORCA, met in the morning of June 9th, and the board approved, this is a little confusing, approved an exceeding the 10% threshold in the building maintenance subcategory by $671 in the fiscal year 2021 budget. And this is not a budget amendment since ORCA has savings and unspent has savings and unspent monies and in their budget authority in the current fiscal year. This request did not increase the agency budget, as the savings in the remaining three categories, payroll, non-payroll, and non-administrative operations, does not increase. But the building O&M category approved at 107,700 is beyond the 110,085 that is in the budget. So we had to amend that, not amend it, but say that we can go over for that amount. We had a hearing for the 2022 budget with an increase in the executive director's salary of $2,400 to bring her up to the minimum salary of the other air agencies in Washington state. After the hearing, the board passed the 2022 fiscal year budget. And then Thurston County's May air quality remained good, although the monitor did lose 4 days of data because of debris. And then the ozone levels didn't exceed the 70 parts per billion, thus staying in the good air quality level. But on May 31st, it was fairly close, around 55 parts per billion. So it's kind of creeping up there as the warmer it gets. And then it's been predicted by staff to be an exceptionally bad year for wildfires. And so they're keeping a close eye on that. Because that will increase the problems with air quality as it did the last time, was significantly. And that's my report.
I just want to report that with all this record rain that we've got in June, that prediction has now changed, and we shouldn't have as bad fires this summer. And summer being starting in what, 3 days, wherever it is, 4 days, as they want. As what they predicted, because of all the rain that we've gotten in June.
Well, because this was the first week in June, it really didn't capture that. But like right after that, we have had downpours and downpours. In fact, David, my husband, is kind of a weather freak and has all these funny instruments. And the most recent day of that downpour was close to 3 inches that day.
There's a record here and down here, and a record up in Seattle. And so, I mean, it was crazy that day. You couldn't go anywhere. It completely overwhelmed even our stormwater system in Lacey. It was crazy.
Yes, so I don't know how that affects it, but one of the problems about downpours when it's extremely hot is that it runs off and not absorbs into the water system. So, I mean, into the soil. So I don't know if that changed it or not. I'd be interested to find out. I could check with Dr. Hadley to see.
I appreciate that. Councilmember Cox.
Alrighty. Tonight's report will just be on Intercity Transit Authority. Our Regional Housing Council will meet next on the 23rd of June. But Intercity Transit did meet last night on the 16th, and big news, it looks like on July 19th, they're going to be resuming at least partial service for the Olympia Tacoma route. It won't be, the 15-minute service that we had gotten to before the pandemic hit, but it's looking like probably hourly service. And part of the holdup on this has been being able to hire enough new operators to actually staff all these runs that we're doing. As reported earlier, there was a service expansion that started just this past Sunday on the 13th, and that is going well. And we have another expansion coming up in September. So Intercity Transit is trying to rebuild from, the just devastating cuts to service that happened with the pandemic. Just a note to people who do ride the bus, the Transportation Security Administration has now removed the requirement that people have to wear masks outdoors at transit facilities. However, to board a bus or to ride a bus, people have to wear a mask. This order is in place until September 13th. And so hopefully it will end there, but there could be new federal guidance that comes down. As many of you are aware, they have been rebuilding the intercity transit facilities at Patterson Street. And phase 3 is coming along quite well, and staff's working to complete the design of phase 4, which would be the maintenance facility, doing away with the existing administration and ops building once the new one is in place, and parking areas. We conducted a public hearing last night on the draft 2020 annual report, as well as the 2021-2026 transit development plan. We reappointed a familiar face to the Transit Authority, Don Milnick, who served on our planning commission.
Nice.
Was appointed to a third 3-year term on the Transit Authority board as citizen representative. And I think it was unanimous. Everybody agreed Don does a great job. And then finally, we received a presentation on the bus stop and service development standards. And it's a very comprehensive plan. It looks at all the infrastructure around a bus stop, and so there are flexible designs to meet what's there. And there will also be efforts to work with our staff as new stops are anticipated, so that there's a mutual understanding of each other's needs, and we try to accommodate them the best we can. And that's my report.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
2 questions. One is it still free to ride the bus like previously? And then secondly, what are you doing with the old facilities of on Patterson? Is it going to be utilized in some other way?
Yes, the Zero Fare project is still ongoing. It was a 5-year pilot project, so
good.
And then in terms of my understanding is that once the new administration building and operations building, and this is at the northwest corner of Patterson and Martin Way, once and everybody's moved into that the old building will come down, and they're going to be redoing that area for parking, as well as some of the bus operations as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Then is that done for your report?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then Councilmember Greenstein.
I have one report tonight. Emergency Medical Service Medic 1 met on June 16th. Primary purpose of the meeting was a first reading of the proposed 2022 budget. I sat on the budget committee, so I'd been in countless meetings in planning this budget. A little more complicated than the usual budget because of the fact that they're going out in August for the levy lid lift on the ballot. So because of that, 2 complete budgets had to be prepared, one with, one without. Because the budget is actually due to the county 4 days after the vote. So there would be no time at that point to prepare a budget. So we had to do 2 separate budgets. We have another meeting on the 13th of July for questions and answers, giving people time to kind of read over the budget, study it some, and then have, be able to ask their questions at that time. But I think it's a good comprehensive budget. If the levy lid lift doesn't pass, it is a very, very tight budget and will likely force them to go back out again on the ballot in the following year for the reason that there would not be funding to continue the Medic 1 services without major cuts at that point. Couple of other things on the agenda. We did have a discussion about paramedic recruitment. In this recruitment effort, which they've really changed up how they did it and tried to modernize things, they've actually have 7 people enrolled in this next upcoming course, which is great because in the last time we got 0, couldn't get anyone. So it's a problem nationally. Every city, every state in the country is struggling to find paramedics right now. So it's a real problem. But we do have 7 for this upcoming class, which is going to be great. And then the last thing I kind of want to just make everyone aware of is Providence Hospital, major partner, obviously, for Medic One, is a level 1 stroke hospital, which is the highest level you can achieve in that. And they've not lost that status as a level 1, but they are struggling, dramatically struggling with staffing. And because of that, there's actually 7 shifts during the month where they cannot actually accommodate that level 1 treatment level. And during those times, if something were to happen, someone may have to be transported north to Tacoma. It's happened twice since April on the stroke protocol that someone had to be transported. And just, it comes from pretty good authority that this is going to continue to be a problem, not only in the stroke department, but in general staffing at the hospital. There is just, it is difficult to get people right now. So staffing is going to be an ongoing issue for the foreseeable future. And that is my report.
Wow.
That's unfortunate. Councilmember Miller.
I do not have a report on these items. My next TRPC meeting is first Friday of next month, and then Thurston Thrives is Monday. However, TRPC will be having a retreat. It's a 2-day, and one day is July 2nd, and then the second day is July 26th, and there's a possibility that we might do July 26th at the Yelm Community Center, if everyone votes for that. That is all.
Okay, then no problem. Councilmember Stedman. Oh, Councilmember Stedman had to step away, so he doesn't have a report, which means that we're at the end of our agenda. And so I really appreciate, got through another meeting. Some really important things were accomplished. So until next time, looks like we have some good weather for a change coming up. And so hope everyone has a great time enjoying the weather. And until next time, we keep it classy, Lacey. I'll call this meeting adjourned.